He just slowly moved the boat over to the dock, got out of the boat, and just slowly walked up to the truck. Not even a rush, didn't run. And he just has a smile on his face, and he's like, "You did a great job. Go ahead and move over." I was just reverberating, like, "Oh," and I was so shocked that he just was so chill.
Who are you?
I'm primarily a mother, not just to my son, but also to myself. Just sitting there the first time and having somebody look into my eyes, I just felt like I was going to burst into tears. I couldn't get past trying to make sure that my therapist thought that I was doing therapy really well. I'll find myself going out the front door and I'll be running towards the chicken house. And I'm like, stop, just walk. You just walk. You can walk now. Nobody's rushing you. 5-year-old me would be elated to have a chicken eating out of her. We do it for her.
Who are you?
I'd say at the moment, I'm primarily a mother. I know that changes. Things change for people a lot. Different phases of life. I've been a lot of different things, but at the moment, it seems like everything's culminating in being a mother, not just to my son, who's 15 months old, but also to myself, and even to people around me. I help mother my friends, and they do the same thing for me likewise, and it just seems like motherhood is the theme of the season lately.
Yeah, that's awesome. You spoke about, I guess, the aspect of like mothering yourself. I'm curious about that for you. Like, where does that come from for you in your journey?
Yeah, so I'm not currently in contact with my parents. Not to say that wouldn't change, but there's a lot of things about having had my son, just being pregnant with him, and then this, subsequent last 15 months with him that bring about a lot of memories, a lot of feelings, a lot of things that put aspects of your childhood experiences in a different perspective. And doing things differently with him than were done with me, some things big, some things small, just gives me a chance to redo, I think, certain things that have happened in my life, different experiences growing up.
Yeah, beautiful. And I know you and I, just for context for the audience, you and I were friends in college. And then I was actually thinking about it. And I was like, I don't even remember why we reconnected, if I had reached out to you or you reached out to me, or like how that all happened. But we had some really good conversations in between there, talking about your journey since then, and wanted to have you come on the podcast to talk about that. And when you and I were in college, we were going to a Christian university, and you left to ultimately kind of marry somebody and go through that process. And then over the course of the last several years, you found yourself deconstructing, divorcing from that person at the time. Now you find yourself like in a lovely marriage with a kid, and kind of gone through your own journey, like through Christianity and through deconstruction, and even left me like a really great, note about like not even just seeing yourself as a Christian and now an ex-Christian, but kind of coming into your own identity. I'm curious for you, when you like take a look back at that entire journey, like when I think about the beginning, where does that all start for you?
The journey of deconstructing, or the journey of life?
Yeah, I mean, either one, whichever one you want to go with. Where does it begin for you?
I guess when I look back at things, I see, like, starting from a really young age, being really intensely in love with Jesus, and like following so diligently trying to follow everything to the letter of loving God, of putting into practice all of the sermons that I heard, all of the exercises they would give us to do in like youth group or doing devotions at home. I mean, I would say even as like a 14, 15-year-old, I can remember reading through the Bible in a year and doing it entirely on my own without, being necessarily prompted to do that. I mean, I was prompted to do it because every single aspect of my life was drenched in Christianity. It was home, it was church multiple times a week, it was Christian school every single day. I only had friends who were Christian. I every single family member that I have is Christian for generations past. So there was no other world or option to be different. I wouldn't have even known what that looked like. So I was doing the thing. I was doing it as well as I could do it, going off to Christian college. And so I think it's interesting to look back and see just how much that permeated every aspect of life. And then there was like a hard stop, kind of during COVID, I guess, so 2020, when I actually started to question things. And there had been little questions here and there leading up to that sort of culminated all at the same time. Treatment of like the LGBTQ community was always something that really confused me about how much they were vilified and how I was supposed to interact with people. There's just conflicting messages in Christianity where you are told to love everybody unconditionally to save their soul, but then so many of the actual actions are very hateful. And so you have to try to make sense of those as a very young person. So coming up into 2020, I was in a pretty abusive marriage, financially, mentally, emotionally, just a lot of different aspects. And then that wasn't being condoned by the church necessarily, but it wasn't being helped by the church either. So there was a lot of abuses that I started to realize were happening almost directly because I was part of Christianity. And I had to realize, despite not wanting to, that all of those things were connected.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say where did it start, because it feels like I just started.
Yeah.
Like 5 years ago, starting to figure out who I am now. And so it's like that whole time block leading up to age, whatever it was, 31, 32, somewhere around there, of beginning to deconstruct. It just was like hitting a wall, like just smack, hitting a brick wall.
Yeah.
And having to like realize that everything I thought was true was not. It's just like the house of cards fell. And I had to start picking up the pieces after that. So yeah, it feels in some ways like I'm a very young person again, trying to learn all over again.
Well, when you said that early on you kind of loved Jesus and you were kind of just like in that world, like at that point in your life, what did it mean for you to like love Jesus or like love God or be an example? Like, what did you, in your mind, what did that mean?
Well, on one hand, it sort of meant avoiding hell with all of my being. I remember I have really early memories of being 4 and 5 years old, praying over and over again for God to forgive me for anything that I did, anything I didn't remember doing, anything I would do in the future. And I would say, Like, forgive me 1,000 times for anything that I did today, and forgive me 1,000 times for anything I, you know, didn't mean to do or don't remember doing, and forgive me because I was so worried about going to hell. But then, on the other hand, I think I had a really rich eternal life. And I would say now, I haven't necessarily lost that, but it was maybe communication with like my higher self. But it being in love with Jesus looked like just pouring myself into reading the Word of God, pouring myself into devotions, like singing songs, singing hymns, writing poetry, journaling. I mean, I just did like everything you could think of. I went on silent retreats to Catholic monasteries and just, I'd get up really early in the morning and try to catch the sunset and just spend time with Jesus, just walking with Jesus and talking with Jesus. And some of those times are still some of my favorite memories that I have, despite deconstructing, because they were really beautiful moments. They were really peaceful, and it was a very like cathartic experience to tap into that.
And then when you said that you were in 2020 and you first started to have these like certain questions start to pop up, I'm curious for you. You talked about like the LGBTQ stuff, but were there other key questions for you that were, I guess, felt really unresolved or unsatisfyingly resolved that like began to kind of peel that onion for you?
I'd say one of the first things was probably the teachings of Paul. Um, he's just not super for women. And so I kind of had always placed that on the back burner and like explained it away and told myself, oh, it's just the teachings of the time. And maybe the context was different, back then, or maybe he didn't really mean it the way that he said it in the Bible. Like, all of the different ways that you can explain it when you're trying to prove the Bible true constantly. Instead, I kind of, for the first time, like dipped a toe in the water of what if I read the Bible from the standpoint of like criticism? Like, what if it's not true?
Yeah.
And that was a really scary adventure to begin with.
What inspired that moment for you, like at that time? Because you've
Well,
been
that's
immersed in it for so long. Yeah.
yeah. So I think I had to question things because my marriage was falling apart, and so I was having to be in Christian counseling, marriage counseling, and the way that that is structured is very much it's for the marriage, not for the people in the marriage. And I think even with the best of intentions, like the Bible is pro heterosexual marriage. And so I think being in the middle of that and everything that I had gone through up until that point, I needed there to be an option where the marriage wasn't saved. I needed there to be an option where I was more important than saving the marriage just for marriage's sake. Because I think as I was in those counseling sessions, and to their credit, the guys that did our counseling, even though they were pastors at our church, they made their best efforts to be pro me and my viewpoint within the confines of their belief system. And I still really appreciate, honestly, like everything that they did to help me like find my voice, to stop framing everything in terms of how my ex-husband felt about things. Because those initial counseling sessions were very much like, okay, what do you think has been going on? And I would say, well, he feels this way about this, or he would be really upset if I was talking about this, or, and they really did help say, but what do you feel about that topic? Where do you feel that in your body? And it was the first time I'd ever had somebody do that repeatedly, like care about my viewpoint with that intensity, I would say.
Yeah. What was
And
that
so
like for you? Like to actually have somebody bring you kind of back into listening to yourself for the first time?
it was shocking. I think like just sitting there the first time and having somebody like look into my eyes like unwaveringly and be so interested in what I was saying, I just felt like I was going to burst into tears.
Hmm.
And we hadn't even started speaking yet. Just being in the room was overwhelming. Um, but I also, so I did a lot of deflecting a lot of times because I wasn't used to that level of connection, I guess,
Hmm.
with
Yeah.
especially with another male who wasn't trying to like get something from me, I guess. Like
Sure.
I don't know. I mean, I that's probably a little bit of a blanket statement, but just
Mhm.
yeah, it was very disconcerting, but in a good way and in a way that started to make me realize this should be the jumping off point. This should be the standard of treatment. But then the further through those sessions I got, and the more I started to say my own feelings and my own thoughts about things and to report what had happened and have somebody else be shocked or just be
Hmm.
witness to things I'd never said out loud about things that happened to me in my marriage. Having someone witness that, especially who was a male, was, I think, what I needed to start to be that advocate for myself because I wasn't. I was always relying on somebody else to advocate for me or to stop coming at me or to, just whatever.
Yeah. Was that something you learned while in your relationship with your husband, or was that something you had learned even before then to kind of add, like, I want to say almost give away your autonomy to somebody else?
I would say it depended on the circumstances, but definitely in situations where I'm in a space with somebody that I am either connected to by blood, family, or somebody that I am in close relationship with, I will give away my autonomy to that person. I am obviously working on that now to not do
Hmm.
that. But the more that I love a person, the more I will let them kind of take over, I think is what I've realized on this side of things. Because I think when you and I were friends, I was very like, you know, sassy and probably didn't come off, that way. And so I think I was, able to advocate for myself in certain circumstances
Hmm.
where people, I'm holding them more at arm's length. There's not as much at stake. Uh, it's not a marriage. It's not it's not my mom. It's not my dad. Like, so it's weird how I could have I guess, a difference there.
Well, I mean, it makes sense to me because it's almost like that arm's length distance thing is almost like if somebody gets close and that's what happens, right? Like if I get close to somebody, I'm going to lose who I am versus like if you keep that arm's distance, then like you can maintain like your autonomy versus like probably what much more of what you are learning or have learned now, especially I'm sure with your husband, is like how to do both, right? How to be in a deep,
Right.
intimate relationship with somebody and still maintain your autonomy within that.
Yeah, I would say that's a beautiful aspect of our relationship is that my husband, he advocates so well for me. He makes sure, that he is hearing my thoughts about a given subject or project or just whatever we're doing. Or he'll say, "Oh, you really lit up when you saw that, that thing, or when you went camping, or, and he'll try to recreate those experiences or
Hmm.
just make sure that my thoughts and feelings are heard. And that was brand new for me. Didn't I didn't have that
Yeah.
previously. So,
Yeah. How has being in this new, I guess, relationship with Matt, how is that like recontextualize like a lot of your own sense of identity and autonomy and even your like sense of self-worth and who you are?
I mean, I'd say being in a relationship with him was like therapy in real time. Um, Undoing a lot of past habits or traumas, and just having the repetitive, he's such a steady, grounded person. Having him continue to be steady and grounded, always react the same. He doesn't explode at me. He doesn't lose his temper. He doesn't. It took so long for my nervous system to come down off of being yelled at, being, um, having someone explode in response to just normal things, I guess.
Hmm.
I didn't have a context for what that was like in an intimate relationship. And so on this side of things, I can look back and see how far I've come because the very beginning of our relationship, I mean, I would just brace or I would almost feel like I was going to cry if like a
Hmm.
tense situation happened. Like there was one time he asked me if I could back his truck with a trailer attached to it down a boat ramp so that he could drive a boat up onto the trailer. And I'd never done anything like that. So I just said, okay, sure. Like, not questioning. Backing up a trailer is really hard. Just FYI for anybody who hasn't done that before. It's not a beginner task. And on a boat ramp, there are so many people there
Hmm.
waiting for you to just complete the task. So I start trying to back up this trailer down a boat ramp and do a terrible job, and it's completely off to the side, and I just froze and felt like, oh my gosh, I'm going to burst into tears because he's going to be so upset because he's sitting there waiting in a boat for me to, you know, get the trailer lined up for him. And instead, he just slowly moved the boat over to the dock that was nearby, got out of the boat, and just slowly walked up to the truck. Not even a rush, didn't run. There's a ton of people waiting on us. And he just has a smile on his face and he's like, "You did a great job. Go ahead and move over. It's okay." And I was just like, just reverberating, like, you know, and I was so shocked that he just was so chill. And it's taken so
Hmm.
many situations like that over and over and over again, even just small situations, parking a car or pulling into a gas station or something, things that you just wouldn't think would be a big deal. But he's always steady, relaxed, not rushed. And that is exactly what my nervous system needed to see happen with consistency over and over again to start to heal and repair that tension that I just lived with
Yeah.
24/7 up until that point.
Yeah. What was that? I guess obviously you're still kind of going through it in different ways, but like what was that journey like to kind of have your nervous system recalibrating over time and like adjusting to that steady presence?
Well, it's really weird.
Hmm.
But also, it's something that I started to learn to do for myself because having him there to help regulate my nervous system is great. But it's also the next step was me doing it for myself. And I didn't realize how many ways I was taking that past abuse and continuing it within my own body. So, things as small as doing chores around the house. Uh, I now purposefully slow my pace way down. I will move at a slow, steady pace when sweeping the floor or mopping or vacuuming. And remind myself to breathe because I realized that I was frenetic. I was doing things as fast as possible because of some unknown presence that's just only in my mind now, um, pushing me to do it faster, but also do it, the best that it possibly can be done. Like the level of tension just in like unloading a dishwasher or sweeping my floor is crazy.
Mm.
And it sounds crazy on this side of it, but those were all, everything needed to be done. Like in my upbringing, everything needed to be done perfectly and as fast as possible. And so that's the pace that you learn. That's what you would, adapt within your body. That's what I did. There wasn't an option for me to be unrushed. And so now I'm learning to do that. And
Yeah.
I have to stop myself all the time. I'll find myself going out the front door to let the chickens out in the morning, and I will be like running towards the chicken house. And I'm like, stop, just walk. You could just walk. Like you can walk now. Nobody's rushing you.
Yeah. Yeah. What does that feel like to consciously slow yourself down when everything in you wants to speed up?
That's hard. It does. It feels good if I can keep it up.
Hmm.
So that's the hardest part is staying consistent and consistently doing that. Even now, I have to slow myself down so that I'm not talking a million miles a minute
Yeah.
and breathe. It just breathing is so essential and something I just wasn't doing very
Yeah.
much or very shallowly. And it makes such a big difference to enter a room having had just a couple of deep breaths. So it it's still just a work in progress, but it's something I'll just keep doing. I always picture the person that I want to become and the person that I will become am becoming. And she is grounded and calm and centered. And that's what I want to be for my child as well. And so I do my best to take moments throughout the day with him being there also for him to witness what it looks like to slow down. He sees his dad do it naturally all the time. And so I'm like, that's a gift that I want to be able to give him and something that I can do differently um, than maybe what I was brought up with.
Beautiful. I wanted to circle back to when you were with your husband in counseling, and you were kind of pointing to some like things that the church did or how it was set up in such a way that was basically allowing the abuse to continue. And I was wondering if you could share with us from your perspective what some of those things were.
Yeah, so the church that we were a part of uh, is a Southern Baptist church. Not that that is a main thing, but they put forward the view of it's a submission narrative, is what I call it. And I can't remember if it's called, I think it's complementarianism, but I'm like really excited that I can't remember what it's called because it means I've healed enough and it's been long enough that I
Hmm.
don't remember every term. But regardless, it's where the man is the head of the home. So God is the father, then Jesus, then the man is under Jesus, and then the woman is under the man, and then the children are under
Hmm.
the woman. So it's you are required to submit to your husband ultimately at the end of the day. And so in theory, if that is done in a healthy way, then it should be a loving authority over you as the woman, and you will lovingly and trustingly submit to him, knowing that he has your best interest in mind at the end of the day. So you hear this put forward, and on this side of it, it sounds really toxic to me. But at the time, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. You have somebody who has your best interest at heart, and so that should be the driving force of all the decisions made. So then the submission to that person shouldn't be a problem. Obviously, that's a pretty problematic thing. And so that was condoned by the church. And then just the way that the church operated puts women inferior to men in almost every aspect. I mean, I was on worship team, and the majority of us were unpaid, but there were a couple of people who led the worship team primarily and put together the songs and did all these things, who it was a male and a female, and the male was paid and the female was not. And they
Hmm.
did as much, I mean, they did the same work, or she might have done the majority of it and had repeatedly asked to be paid. And they kept putting her off or refusing or saying, we just can't do that right now. And it just, at the time, I remember thinking, well, that's not fair. But I didn't really take it much further than that. It's just all of those situations that you're witness to where women are put beneath men, you internalize that whether they're saying something explicitly or not. So it wasn't that odd to me to be in submission to my husband because that was the way everything around me was structured.
Yeah. Did you like, you talked about how, initially with like submission, you're like, yeah, if you had this like loving caretaker, essentially, like it makes sense to submit to them. And I'm curious for you, did you, whether consciously or not, did you see yourself as a woman as being sort of less than men?
Not men in general, but I saw myself. So we attended, me and this friend that I had at the time attended women's school at this church. So it was a 9-month program where they taught you how to be a godly woman. And on day one, they told us that our definition in the Bible, in some verse in Genesis that I can't remember, is to be a helpmeet to the man. So
Help
they
meet?
said, yeah, or yeah, help meet,
Like
help.
MEAT? Like a piece of meat? Or like meat as in like you're meeting somebody?
No, I think it was MEET, like help.
Okay.
Those weird like biblical terms
Yeah.
that don't make sense outside of that context. But I think it was help meet, not help mate. Like,
Hmm.
regardless, day one, they're like, this is your role. You are the helper, the partner, the lifter of this man that you are either married to or going to be married to. Um, and then the domino effect of all of the, subsequent lessons relied upon that narrative. So I think in my mind I was not less than him, but my role was different than his was. I was supposed to help him through law school. I was supposed to help him achieve the goals and dreams that he had in mind. Ideally, they would be putting forth the, you know, God's mission of saving all of the souls in the world. Um, but at the end of the day, I was there to support him. And if you are told enough times that that role is just as important but different, then you believe it. I thought that what I was doing was important. I didn't see that they were constantly making us inferior to all of the males around us.
No. Yeah, I think especially what I hear in that is like also that you're being told like this is the correct way for you to be, right? Versus like you consciously opting into that being a part of your role, or if that's something that you want to have or not. It's like this is what is right for you, with sort of without your buy-in or consent.
Yeah, and I think I was always really into theology and delving into the scriptures in the deepest possible way. And so the way that that particular class was structured was to take everything back to the Hebrew or take everything back to the
Mm,
Greek and to really study these passages. And so it felt legit, I guess.
mm,
Like, well, they
yeah,
really studied this. This is what the Bible says. And maybe it is. I don't know anymore, but it seemed right. It seemed right.
yeah. And when you started to, going back to like your kind of first like awakening with the Christian counselors, and as you're starting to unpack and question these different things, like how did you start to see yourself and I guess like women differently as you started to question those parts of the narrative?
I don't know. I think I just saw the way that the church was structured and even the way that the counseling was structured, the way that I'd been brought up was structured, like paved the perfect road for these abuses to happen. So I think what I was seeing, the patterns that I was starting to see, was that the way everything was structured is what made it so easy for these abuses to occur, both when I was growing up and, as I got into my marriage. I just, I was like, this whole thing is wrong. Like,
Mm,
and there's no way for me to continue to be a part of this church and the way that this is, like, I can't change the way that this is structured. It's too deeply entrenched. Even if I bring it up to the pastors of the church, like nothing is going to change because it doesn't behoove anybody for it to change.
right.
So I have to leave. I have to take myself somewhere else where there's room for me to grow and get out of this box that I've been in. I started to outgrow the box. And
Yeah.
I saw that so many other women were being pushed into maybe being a stay-at-home mom when they were actually just a fantastic like financial advisor, or like all of the decisions were being deferred to their husband, who was maybe just not as good at making those types of decisions as as their wife would have been. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Like this doesn't, it's not logical anymore.
Hmm. Yeah. And for you, as you're like starting to deconstruct and I guess at some point you decide to like leave the church, like what was that experience like for you? Like I know that you kind of in that note you talked about, nobody really asks how you're doing, they just ask you to come back. And, if you can share kind of about what that experience was like for you.
Yeah, I mean, deconstruction happened suddenly, but also slowly because I didn't want to let it go. I didn't want to lose my entire foundation. I wanted to keep my relationship with God and Jesus and yeah, so deconstruction happened all at once, but also really slowly because I didn't want to give it up, but I also didn't know how to exist in any other universe. I mean, my entire world was centered around church and the Bible, and it was my every moment of every day. So to suddenly have it not be central was bizarre. So I did try to go back to church. It was highly triggering. I couldn't go back to the same campus that my soon to be ex-husband at the time, and I had gone to. Our church had multiple campuses, so I tried to go to a different one. I just felt like I was going to break down the whole time. It was not doable. And even still, members of the worship team were, I think, in a very loving way or trying to be loving were inviting me back and telling me to come. And I was telling them, um, I just don't know if I believe all of the same things anymore. I'm kind of struggling and I'm, going through this divorce process and it just is kind of hard. And nobody really asked about that. They just said, well, you can come back and sing if you want to, which felt really bizarre to me because I had just told them, like, I don't know if I believe like the things that we're singing anymore. And so I can't get up in front of people and sing things that now don't make sense or I don't believe. Like that would be really fake. Like,
Yeah.
and so I think on their end, it was a kind thing. They were making room maybe for me to be questioning things and saying, hey, you're still welcome while you're questioning things. But they didn't want to know what I was questioning or ask anything, like, so it can happen up to a point. You
Mm.
can be supportive up to a point, I think, when you're in a belief system that's that rigid. So I appreciated like what they were trying to do, um, in still keeping the door open for me to do that, but I couldn't do it. It just didn't feel right.
So what did you turn to, I guess, for support at that time in your life? Because, it's your husband, it sounds like all your friends, all of your family are in this system or belief system that you no longer believe. And like you mentioned, like not even just like the internal foundation of your reality, how do you navigate that, but like all of your relationships are enmeshed in that as well. Like how did you end up, I don't know, finding support? Was it through the internet? Did you find other friends or coworkers? Like how did you navigate that?
I I I had reconnected. I had started to reconnect with some friends that I had like a core group of girlfriends since high school. And so that was a big support was having people who knew me from before everything had happened, before I'd ever gotten married. Um, and we are still very tight to this day, I think,
Mm.
because they really bent over backwards to come out and visit me. We don't live in the same state. They live out in Oregon and I live in Kentucky. And so um they all, flew out here to, kind of just show support, be there for
Mm.
me. And then I also did, I think, lean more on people that I had started to become friends with that were not part of the church because I had a few friends that were not part of the church. And I think that was another thing that really shined a light on things for me was going through my separation and divorce. Whenever someone from the church um, was sitting across from me and kind of hearing what I was going through, they were, of course, kind and supportive, but it was also, okay, I'll pray for your marriage to be restored. And I was like, don't pray for that. like, like I am past the point. Like, no, like I need to be free of this person. And um, the difference was so stark between people who were outside of the church and I that would sit across from me and they would say, oh my gosh, what do you need? All of those things that you've said, like they didn't require explanation at all. But if they if they did hear things that I had to say, there was no like, well, we need to save your marriage. It was like, no, we need to save you. Like, what can we do to
Mm.
help you and make this easier for you? And just that was such a stark difference of having the marriage be the focus versus me be the focus. And after I had told some pretty dark stories, the same ones being told to different people, and the reactions are very different. It was, well, that's horrible. I'll pray that the Lord changes his heart. And I'm like, it's not changing. Like, you can pray for that, but he can change it with somebody else. Like, not me. I hope for that too. So it just, and I think being cared for in such a different way and so well by people outside of the church was very shocking because we'd always been told that non-Christians were of the world and that they're selfish and that they don't have the heart of Jesus and they're lost and all these things. And so I was shocked to receive better or more, I don't know, just I guess better treatment at the end of the day, more understanding treatment from people who were of the world than who were part of the church because I'd always been told the opposite.
Yeah. I resonate with that a lot because I think a lot of my own journey. I think going to like a bunch of different raves and stuff. That was one of the things that like surprised me being out there. Was like I felt like I experienced the idea of the Christianity that I believed in as a kid out there with all these in quotes sinners. People around, everybody's doing drugs and wearing crazy outfits and doing wild things.
Right.
But like in that space was like the kindest, safest people who loved you for whoever you were and embraced you for yourself and were kind to you. And I mean, I don't know how many times I've lost my cell phone at a rave and never gotten it like actually taken away. It always ends up in lost and found, or somebody finds it, or whatever it is, right? There's just, you're surrounded by people who are looking out for you, and it feels like such a safe space because of it. I was talking about how just like being around like at a rave, like seeing all these people and feeling like I'm finding more of the Christianity that I believed in as a kid, and like at like a rave or at a festival or these kinds of things where you're surrounded and like that you people were really looking out for you, treating you safely, treating you kindly, and like really wanting the best for you, even though you're a complete and total stranger, and how welcoming they are to anybody who's new into that space. Is exactly what I imagined like the church meaning to be, but not like actualizing.
Yeah, well, I think it's impossible for the church to do that because there is a set of standards and ideals that you are supposed to adhere to. And so you can enter a space like a rave, and there is no set of standards or ideals that you are required to adhere to. There is just, I am entering this space and you are entering this space. And like, who are you? Like, you ask your question, like, who are you? And it's a genuine question because you're curious about that person. What's your background? Tell me about you. Whereas the headspace that I was in, at least when I was in the church, was okay, who are you and who can you become in Jesus? And it's not from a malicious standpoint, but it just necessarily reduces that person sitting across from you down to you are a human and you should be saved by Jesus. And a person who is saved by Jesus acts like this and follows these certain rules and guidelines. And so it then kind of clips your wings as a human. You can't fully expand outside of that box because you're supposed to fit in that box. So when you're in deep need, going through an experience that doesn't fit inside of that box, the only people who can really fully embrace you are ones who live outside that box. That's what it was like. I don't think it, I still have people that I'm friends with that are inside the church. The ones who, were like true, deep friends. And I think we do our best to kind of like not have the religion thing be the central point of our relationship. And I really appreciate that they're able to do that because I think that was really hard for me to do when I was in the church. And I think it's hard for a lot of people to do. It's it's like a block that, gets put between you and a person in front of you.
Yeah, well, I think it becomes a challenge, right? Because when, kind of like you said about just being at 5 years old, and I have a similar experience of being five and feeling like I'm going to hell, and this fear of that, and then also the moral responsibility that you are bestowed to then save other people, right? And so, like, if you genuinely think that your friend is going to be burning in hell for eternity, of course there's like a moral obligation to like get you to come back to church, right? On some level,
Right.
there's a sense of like I gotta save my friend, and that can create this like almost a terrible tension that you can feel where you're like on one hand feeling an obligation to save somebody, on the other hand not wanting to sever the connection, and it can be a
Yeah.
very challenging thing for so many people to walk. Yeah, because you have to be able to like love somebody for who they are to stay in relationship with them.
Yeah, otherwise it's not a real relationship, is it?
Yeah,
I think that's
yeah,
something I have had to learn, the hard way through leaving the church.
yeah.
It's a painful experience, but it's interesting to step back and forth. I almost can like step back and forth, and I'm sure you can too, between the past mindset and your present mindset. And I'm glad in some ways that that can still happen because I know, and what you just said, that like people are coming at it from a genuine want to save you. And if they are doing their religion the right way, that's exactly what they should be doing. Like they're
Hmm.
doing it right. But yeah, it's awkward to be a part of, on
Hmm.
this side of it sometimes. So,
Yeah. What was that like for you? Or I don't know if there was like a moment for you where you first felt kind of on the other side of it, where you were like, I don't know, a sense of, I don't know if that was freedom or fear or whatever that might be, but was there a moment for you where you kind of first felt like you were on the other side?
I had a series of experiences where when I was going through my separation before the divorce, I was trying to really stay in close contact with a lot of people because it is such a lonely time. So I was having lunches and having, hangouts with just all kinds of people, including people that I had been going to church with because I was still like not fully out of the church. But I had also met my husband, Matt. And it
Hmm.
was before I was fully divorced. And that timing was, not what I would have planned, but it's what happened. And that experience of meeting him, being in relationship with him and realizing how how much pure um like just what a real love that was, like a real genuine love, like from his end, also from my end, but just and comparing that to being married to my, soon to be ex-husband and knowing that the church would call me being with Matt sin because I was still married to my ex-husband. So what I was doing was like really extra terrible, in their
Yeah.
eyes. And so that cognitive dissonance of sitting there and saying, okay, well, you're saying that what I'm doing is sinful in being with him, but how can you sit there and say that what I'm doing with him and being with him is worse in God's eyes than like the sexual abuse that I experienced within the confines of marriage? And there was never an answer for that. But that was a light bulb moment for me of feeling on the outside of I finally was doing something that felt right to me and not asking for anybody else to be okay with it and feeling the consequences of that in real time and feeling the awkward dead silence over a dinner table at a Mexican restaurant with, women that I had been friends with for a long time, but them just looking at their laps and saying, well, that we think that that's sin. And me just being shocked because what I was experiencing was just so much more healing than anything that I'd experienced in marriage. But marriage was supposed to be okay. And what I was doing now was not. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. But
Yeah.
also, I kind of walked away from that saying, okay, this makes things a lot more clear for me in leaving.
Yeah. What I heard in that too was like, the experiences you were having with Matt, and like you talked about like this being like a really healing experience compared to the abuse that you were experiencing inside of the marriage. It's like it sounds like almost like it's for the first time your body started to clock and like pay attention to like how you were really feeling versus just
Yeah.
what you were told you were supposed to be doing. Like even the like language that they use of like we think this is a sin, right? It's like they're thinking and kind of making it that reality for themselves rather
Right.
than like going to the experience and asking like, well, what is the experience telling me, right? That like God has given me whatever, my body and my feelings and my thoughts and all of these different things, and this is something that is providing joy. Like, why would that be sinful if that is like the case?
Right. It just didn't make any sense. And I think I can understand, I guess, if you're looking at things black and white on paper from a rigid, you know, kind of
Mm-hmm.
religious standpoint, it's like, well, this is right and this is wrong. End of story. Like, there is no gray area or in between. And it's like I walked away from those conversations suddenly seeing shades of gray that I had never perceived before and realizing that that existed. I was brought up just with black and white. And it's like, wait, the rest of the world exists on a different different plane than this.
Yeah. What was that kind of like to have that light bulb moment go off and seeing all of these shades of gray for the first time?
In some ways freeing, and in other ways pretty overwhelming because it is comfortable to have a set of rules to live by and to be able to say, this is right and this is wrong, the end. But I think once I got past the like fear of the unknown, the which I would liken it to maybe like an animal that's been in a cage its whole life and then you let it out. Like it's not just gonna like run off because it doesn't even know what it's like to be able to move around.
Mm.
And so it's slow, it's and it's scary. Um, but
What were you
also
scared of? Okay, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say curiosity was something that I hadn't
Mm.
experienced a lot of previously. And so the freedom and like the joy and just kind of the goofiness of like curiosity, it was like something I was just discovering for the first time and
Mm.
having everything not be so serious. It's really nice.
Yeah. Were there any things like in particular that you found a lot of curiosity in really early on that you were like really excited to get to explore or take an interest in and kind of like finding that new sense of self-discovery?
I mean, I think I started to take interest in quite a few things. I started slowly, but I had always been interested in, going horseback riding. And so I was like, okay, I'm curious about that. I don't have to ask anybody's permission to go do this now. I'm just going
Mm-hmm.
to go do it. Or I want to read about a given subject that would have been really taboo, within the confines of religion. I read a lot of things about sexuality and female sexuality and kind of tapping into that, just learning the opposite of purity culture, which
Mm-hmm.
I know we've talked about some. It just was something that was not okay to explore much, or if you did, you didn't talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
like because there are definitely some pretty wild Christians out there, but they don't talk about it.
Right.
So but it was all like pretty brand new to me.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so it was all kinds of things. I have a hairdresser that's gay who was a friend of mine beforehand, but I just felt like I was free to hang out and not have expectations
Hmm.
of him being any different than exactly who he was. And I got to just really like get to know him and enjoy him as a person. And I was like, I didn't feel like I could do that within the church. There just was always the ultimate need to save their soul that, it's a really heavy weight to carry around. And I just suddenly didn't have that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so much of what I heard in there was like, I mean, you talked about early on in the podcast about like, mothering yourself. And it almost sounds like for the first time in your life, and obviously, like, context dependent, like you talked about being at school and stuff, I'm sure you made choices about what you wanted to eat, where you wanted to go, and who you wanted to spend time with. But like, there's so much of what comes up is just the sense of like you choosing to do what you wanted and like the freedom to really follow your own joy and your own curiosity and spend time in the ways that you wanted to. I think one of the words you use often over and over again was like without permission. Whether it sounds like permission from your parents or from God or from the church or from your husband. It
Everyone.
was like, yeah, the only person's like permission that you needed was yours.
Yeah, and that's still something I'm like learning to exercise, but
Mm,
it has come a long way, thankfully. But yeah, I think even for the longest time, even just in telling my story, I felt like I needed validation from whoever I was telling it to. And I mean, like I did and I didn't. I felt like if they disapproved, then I needed to, of any aspect, then I needed to rephrase or maybe give more context or just I needed them to be okay with the decisions that I had made. And so even in that, I was needing permission
mhm.
to have lived my life the way that I have up until this point. And now I feel like I've finally kind of come to the point where I'm okay if somebody doesn't approve. I don't have to go into a fawn response if I don't know, somebody says, "Oh, well, I wouldn't have done that thing that way."
Mm,
Like it just would have sent me into a lot of anxiety previously to feel like and I guess it's just that it's that people pleaser thing that a lot of us are brought up with and the purity culture that comes into that where it's like you need to be perfect and approved of at
yeah.
all times or else you're not, pure and it just so much of it is unspoken that it's really hard to address it. Like,
Hmm.
even in therapy because you don't know that you're even doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Um,
know that for like fawning responses or fight or flight response. I think a lot of people who've been in therapy, myself included, where it's like, the first time that's kind of noticed by a therapist, right? Where you like, you notice you're doing this, or like I'm sure for you when you're talked about like, that's great about what your husband thinks, but what do you think, right? Just to all of a sudden kind of have that light bulb switch where you're like, hadn't even realized I'm doing that. It's so
yeah.
ingrained or habitual to protect other people's feelings or whatever it might be, or to need that sense of like reassurance and validation.
Well, I also almost even felt like I did therapy for several years, off and on, few different therapists. After I left the church, I obviously didn't stay with the same therapist who had been, Christian counselors. So I kind of branched out, was trying to awkwardly find my way in a world of, non-Christian therapy, like not knowing who's okay and who's not. And so I met with a few different people. And I don't know if this is other people's experience, but even in therapy, couldn't get past the people pleasing. I couldn't
Hmm.
get past trying to make sure that my therapist thought that I was doing therapy really well. It
Hmm.
just, so I've had to do like the majority of my inner work on my own because
Hmm.
of that. Which luckily there's a lot of resources out there. There's a lot of videos, there's a lot of books,
Hmm.
there's journals and different things. And so I don't think that's something I hear a lot of people say. Like
Hmm.
generally, therapy is hailed as kind of one of the best things, and I really still agree with that. I just wonder if there's certain personality types like mine where it's a block to being
Hmm.
able to actually do some of the darker work.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I think that resonates with me in a lot of ways because I think that there's, on some ways, I think you could do that deeper, darker work with a therapist, but they have to be so skilled to be able to notice that. And I think that's one of the limitations with any form of therapy that you go with, is you're always limited by the skill set of the individual that you're with, or their perspectives and biases and stuff. And I think
right.
at the end of the day, too, and especially when you're in cultures like the one that you were raised in and ones that I was raised in, like you can learn to, for lack of a better word, like lie really well, right? To hide your facial expressions and your emotions. And in your
Yes.
mind, you might feel like, oh my gosh, everybody notices this, but people really just can't tell because you've learned to like mask to in order to protect yourself. And
Mhm.
if they're not necessarily skilled enough to notice those, slight micro fracture of how your face responds or something like that, like they're not going to notice it. And yeah, I think I agree. I think doing the internal work on some level, it's all on you anyway. And so like you finding your own
Yeah.
path, I think is so crucial to it all.
Hmm. No, I think you hit the nail on the head.
Hmm.
I can be so good at that that I'm like lying to myself. Like sometimes it takes
Hmm.
me days to realize my actual reaction to a situation. It's
Hmm.
so delayed. Um, it like for me to get angry about a situation, some people are really like quick to anger. They know exactly what they feel about a situation. I have no idea what that's like. That's
Hmm.
somebody could be so rude, so just belligerently awful to my face, and I will just basically be blank. Like I will have nothing to say. I will feel nothing except maybe like my adrenaline will start going, but like I just will have no reaction, no words, no nothing. And it will be like 3 or 4 days later that I will get so pissed off about it. But it takes so long. And it happens like that with a lot of different emotions. It's not just anger, but it's so many things I hide from myself really well that it just takes a long time. And so I think in the moment, answering questions in real time in a therapy session was really good on the front end of things when I had never addressed anything at all because it really made me aware of things that I just had no idea I was doing that were very obvious, like you said. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's that when it comes to the masking that I'm even doing for myself, and having to unpack that, I've had to do the majority of that on my own.
Yeah. Were there, you mentioned different like books or journals or, guides, I'm guessing, that have supported you through, or were there like any ones in particular that really stood out that made a big impact for you?
I knew you were going to ask me that. I I don't know if I read a lot of books on um, narcissism and learning just all of the hallmarks of that because the man that I was married to was very much a narcissist in like the clinical sense of the term, not like just the way that people kind of toss it around. So I was educating myself on that. There was a book about, I think it was like uncovering financial abuse. That
Hmm.
was another one that I had unpacked with. There was a book called Come As You Are, which is like a
Mm-hmm.
female sexuality centered book that was pretty pivotal in understanding. um, just the variety of ways that, women's bodies function. Not just women's, though. I mean, it's really, I think they go over all of it, but it's, we're taught such a straight line way to go about sexuality in the confines of purity culture that just to be able to breathe a sigh of relief and read a book like that that
Mm.
allows for so many other options and avenues was just really eye-opening and freeing,
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah, I mean, what was that? You mentioned like that was one of the things you like dived into was like reading a lot of books on like female sexuality and like understanding yourself. Like, what what benefits, I guess, did you find? Obviously, probably sexual benefits, but like, what other benefits did you find by exploring that and kind of finding that sexual empowerment within yourself?
Well, I think that's the way that I started being able to tune into my own body as like a compass
Hmm.
in life and what is safe and what's not safe and who is safe and not safe. Um, because I mean, your sexuality is like one of your most primal ways that you can like interact with the world. It's your thinking brain is more turned off, ideally, I think, for me anyway, than it would normally be. And so I started to learn to like I just had never tapped into like my gut, basically.
Hmm.
I was always in my head in thinking and overthinking situations. And I think allowing myself to look at sexuality differently, to experience it with just like more freedom and less judgment, then allowed me to take that skill into like more day to day life
Hmm.
circumstances to be like, this person makes me uncomfortable.
Hmm.
Like, I don't really want to be around them. And I just
Hmm.
had never like done that before.
Yeah.
I've ended up with like really creepy stalker situations because I didn't listen to my gut telling me like this person is scary and problematic and you should not, let them be around you. But it developed into a stalking situation and police were called because
Hmm.
I was young and didn't listen to my gut. Even though looking back, there were red flags that I could see and experience, but I don't know. I just overlooked all of them, looked past all of them and said, "Oh,
Yeah.
they're just being weird or they're just, it's fine. I don't want to judge him. I don't want to act like he's doing something he's not. Like it's okay." And now like, I don't have to have a reason to be uncomfortable around someone. It's just enough that something is making me feel uncomfortable, and I don't have to have permission to not be around that person. I don't have to convince anybody else,
Yeah.
or even myself. I can just
Yeah.
move the other direction.
Yeah. I loved what you said about it, like helping you kind of like find your body as a compass, right? Like whether that's feeling towards like, oh, this feels good and I want to move towards this, or this feels not good and I want to move away from this, or
Mm.
the various shades of gray that are in between all of that as well.
Yeah.
Um, and one of the things that you and I talked a little bit about before, but we talked about in that note was, in finding and listening to yourself and your I would say your guidance system more. You've seemingly kind of started to tap into some of those like kind of more intuitive gifts. I think you talked about being able to kind of feel Matt's feelings or know when your
Yeah.
cat needs to be let in the house when you haven't heard them or anything, or just these other little cues. I'm curious, like what that has been like for you to, I want to say, tap into your intuition and find like a new sense of, maybe spiritual gifts. That's my language for it, but like whatever your language for it might be.
Yeah, I don't know if I have language for it yet, so we can go with, spiritual gifts if you want
Sure.
to. But yeah, I do think that you're right that that journey, that trajectory of starting to listen to my gut has probably led to where I am now, to where I actually can feel those inaudible feelings where I will automatically know, it's a knowing of Matt will have been gone at work all day, but I will feel like I'm going to cry all day long. And I don't know why. I'm like, is this from me? Like, what's going on? And he'll come home and I'll be like, did you, feel like you were upset today? Like, was something going on? And he'll say, like, yeah, I've had a really hard day. Like, he lost his mom a couple of years ago. So it's not that uncommon for him to have a hard day every once in a while. And to have that be weighing on him. And so I will have felt just so overwhelmed or like start crying. And I'm like, I don't have anything to cry about. What is going on? And it will be consistently, we've realized the pattern is that I'm feeling what he's feeling. And I don't know if I've had that with anybody else. It's possible that I just didn't know what was going on if I did, because I have had things like that in life where I'm like, I feel a really strong feeling and I don't know why. But it took even being willing to say, like, this feels weird and don't think I'm weird, but like, I think maybe this is happening. I think I'm feeling your feelings. Like, but uh for him, he's also a very like curious and open person. And so he's like, huh, that's interesting. We'll have to, keep an eye on that, see if that happens again, or, or he'll ask questions about it, like, what time of day it was that it was happening or something like that. And yeah, the same thing happens with my cat, which we heard him earlier, but he is an indoor cat and I've had him for 15 years. And every single time, which this is one I've known about for a long time, like, but I always know if he's gotten outside somehow and is scared. Like, I will just feel him sending a bat signal, basically, of fear that he's outside. And I don't know, I'll be reading a book or working or something, and I'll be like, Atticus is outside. Like, and I just have to go get him. And I used to kind of gaslight myself and be like, oh, I'm just going to look around the house. I'll look and see, maybe he's under the bed or whatever. And after searching the entire house, I'll go outside, search around for a little bit. And sure enough, he's, hovering under a bush or something. And he will just wait wherever he is until I come and find him, because that's just who he is. So I'll just freeze and just wait, and then I'll go and pick him up and I'll bring him back in the house. And well, it's bizarre, but it's what happens. So I'm still exploring that one because I don't know the extent to which that happens. I do know quite a bit after being estranged from my parents. That was kind of a mental torture for a long time because I was quite connected to them. And my dreams and my all day long, I would be almost like hearing their thoughts and feelings. And I think probably because those were so strong, like, they're in pain, I'm in pain. And sure enough, I'd have a dream about my dad saying like very specific words or phrases. And then like the next email that I would get would be those exact words and phrases. And I'm like, man, I've been waiting a month for you to finally send me an email that said all of those things because I've been hearing them, the whole time. So, I do know that that's happened with them, but it's a wild ride.
Yeah. Like how do you, I guess personally at this point in your journey, like make sense of, all of that?
I would think it would have to come down to like a really deep empathy of people that I've been connected to or am highly connected to. Um, because I do like, even though I'm not speaking with my parents, like I do care about how they feel and how the things that I'm saying come across to them, because I had limited communications to just email when I was pregnant with my son. It became really clear that I needed to have everything written down, like a written record, because there was a lot of, no, I never said things like that. And I was like, okay, we're going to switch to just written words so that everybody's really clear on what has and hasn't been said. And I I don't know how else. I mean, even in the emails that I would send them, I would just agonize over every single word and phrase that I wrote because I didn't want them to feel bad or, bad about themselves or their parenting or their intentions. And so I just feel like that connection when I am feeling other people's feelings or like thoughts to a certain extent has to come down to like a deep empathy connection with them that's pre-existing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That makes sense. Um, Now I know you talked about this at the beginning, and I talked about this a little off camera too. But like, you feel comfortable sharing at all about what led to the decision to go no contact with your parents?
Yeah, I think for a long time there had been a lot of expectations on me to like be the, certain kind of Christian daughter that they brought me up to be. And that in and of itself wasn't the most problematic thing, but there was a fair amount of like corporal punishment when I was growing up. A lot of like rage, just outbursts of anger and those type of things. And so I was eager to leave my home as soon as I could. And that's what landed us at the same college in Southern California was I wanted to be far away.
Mm.
At least like I wasn't thinking about it in that sense. I think I was just more reacting to it in like a gut kind of way, like
Mm.
just putting distance. Because if you had asked me at that point, I would have said, "Oh yeah, I love my parents and they did their best in bringing me up, and I miss them and I'm happy to see them at Christmas time." Like I wouldn't have said anything specific about my upbringing, but I think I just knew deep down that I needed space from all of that. So then fast forward to now, those types of situations have still happened
Mm.
periodically throughout my adulthood,
Mm.
where, we'll be in a visit and maybe my dad will have a really intense reaction to something, or even, yell at me or act like I need to, obey. Like,
Mm.
and so those things have happened enough that I knew that if I started acting with any real type of autonomy, that they would happen a lot more. And so I started to kind of put distance in that relationship, and then um, I I started going to therapy and talking about those things. And I think as that happened, I started realizing like at some point, I'm probably going to need to say something to my parents about these experiences and tell them why I'm kind of continuing to put distance, not visiting as often or declining to go on vacations together where we're all staying in the same house or the same
Mm.
hotel suite, that type of thing, because it was just so triggering to be in
Mm.
those spaces. And it was becoming more so the more that I was giving words to what
Mm.
had happened. And so finally, at one point, they had invited me on a vacation and I said no. And they got really frustrated. And I said, well, we can talk about why if you want to. We don't have to. We don't have to talk about why, but we can if you want to hear it. And so they said yes. It was the first of many conversations over the course of a couple of years where I said, hey, these things happened when I was growing up, things were pretty abusive and there was a lot of denying of anything that happened, saying that didn't happen or you remember it wrong. And I think just after enough times of hearing that and different variations of that, when I became pregnant with my son Bo, it became so clear. I think I just finally thought about it in terms of somebody else. Like, what if I did that to my child that is growing inside of me? And I was just like, I would never do that. Even if he brought up things that I did and I didn't want to address them, I would still never deny that they happened, or I don't know, I would ask questions or be curious or apologize or just any number of things. And I think it just finally made it clear what wasn't happening in my relationship with my parents. And so I said, I can't keep having these conversations. Like, I'm pregnant. This is really intense time for me. Um, and it finally allowed me to do what I should have done probably years before, because that type of treatment had been going on for a long time. And it devolved over various email communications. And then finally, I think about a year ago was like maybe the last communication that we had. So there's been just radio silence ever since then.
And as I know that you talked about it, kind of feeling like you're cutting off your own arm with doing something like this, and kind of being told it's like a trend, or you're going in this kind of other direction that's just on social media. I guess if are you open to just sharing about what that has been like for you to actually have to do that for yourself, even though it is painful.
Yeah, I think I just tried so hard to explain myself in every possible way, to rephrase everything in like a kinder, more gentle way. And I would ruminate over things over and over again because I knew that the accusation would be, well, you're just doing this suddenly. And then
Mm.
that ended up proving true. In the emails, you know, that went back and forth, there was accusations that I was part of a movement, and saying that they had no idea how involved in this movement I really was. And I
Mm.
have no idea what that is. And I was like, that's news to me. I'm part of a movement. Like, okay. And saying, you know, this is a trend on social media. You need to get off social media and take
Mm.
time away. And it just felt like yelling into the abyss. Like nobody
Mm.
was hearing me. And I didn't want, I just couldn't compute that they maybe didn't want to understand. I'm not going to try to speak for their experience, but it just on this side of it, it still doesn't really compute for me to have a parent like listen so defensively and deflectively that like they don't actually hear any of the words that you're saying. Um, and so to then have to pivot from over explanation, because over explanation was where I lived and breathed and made my bread and butter. Like, so to decide to do something different was so excruciating. It really did. Like you said, I had said it felt like having to make the decision to cut off my own arm because I didn't want to lose connection with them. I didn't want to stop talking with them. I just wanted them to treat me as an equal human being to them. And it seemed like the only option from their perspective was either they're dominant or they see me as trying to become dominant. And all I ever wanted was like us to be on an equal playing field. Like we're both adults now. We can just talk about what happened. I don't need you to like, you know, fix it. I just need you to recognize that that happened and that it wasn't okay, and like care, I guess. That
Yeah.
that it was hurtful and that it like is hard for me to deal with now. Like there's so much fallout that I deal with from it to this day, and it just doesn't make sense to me how they could like not care about that. But even more so, I never was demanding that they like just lay down and take whatever I was dishing out. You know, I didn't want retribution. I just wanted understanding.
Um, one of the things I was, curious about, and like as we've connected, and then again reading the notes file was, um, looking back at that journey from where you started being fully immersed in the church to having those first couple moments of awareness with the counselors to, where you are today, able to like navigate the world with your own guidance system and going from giving away all of your autonomy through a large part of your life to, finding your own now. I guess when you look at that journey from beginning to, I don't say end, but to where it is today, what comes up for you?
I think now I look at it with fondness, if that makes sense. Things are a lot more fun now. I'm a lot more free to make whatever decision I want to at any given time during the day. And so just continuing to explore that and just having fun with it and saying, it's okay if I take an extra 10 minutes to just like try to coax this chicken to eat out of my hand. Like, I don't have to rush back into the house. Like, 5-year-old me would be elated to have a chicken eating out of her hand. We do it for her, So I just do things I think that like I would have thought were really cool, like back when I was little and growing up and at any age. Um, doing my hair a weird way or like just doing something like I'll probably do it again, but I had like dreadlock extensions braided into
Mm.
my hair for quite a while and I just haven't had the time to put them back in. But I'm like, you know, 17-year-old me would have thought that was so cool. Like, and I just would never have allowed myself to do it because that would have been really weird. My ex-husband would have hated it. Like, it's just a lot of things like people would have really not even had to give me that hard of a time to keep me from doing it. And now I'm like, I don't care what anybody else thinks. Like, I think it's cool. My inner child thinks it's cool. So it's cool. Like, we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And obviously, it helps to have a partner who is supportive of whatever I want to do. But I also feel like I can make that decision regardless,
Hmm.
now. Um, so I just try to have a lot of fun with it on this side of it and try not to create too many rules for myself.
Beautiful. Well, we are at the end of our episode, and there's one question I always ask the guests at the end of the episode, which is, what's one question that you might have for the audience that might shift their perspective or have them consider something in a different way?
Hmm, that's hard. Question for the audience. I don't know. Have you looked at something from someone else's perspective lately? I think is something I try to live by always, even still. I just live by it differently now. Um, and even if that alternate perspective is your younger self, I just feel like that's a really solid jumping off point. So, yeah, have you looked at something from the perspective of your 10-year-old self lately?
Beautiful. I love that question. That's a great question to play with for sure. Brieanna, this has been super fun and a blast to have you on. I guess, I don't know, do you want to send anybody to like your social media or anything? You don't have to, but this is usually when I plug that if they want to.
Yeah, mine's private. I mean,
Okay.
so I don't know. I probably would like reject it. I'd be like, who's
Well, if you really wanna connect with Brianna, just message me and I'll be her
there you
filter
go.
if
Yeah.
you want to connect with her. Brianna, it's been a pleasure to have you on, and we'll have to talk again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been
My pleasure.
awesome.
Good.